Assalamualaikum and very good day to Dr. Umur and my dear classmates. My name is Muhammad Syariza bin Muhammad Ridwan, metric number 262906, and me and my group mates will be presenting on the rights of children in Somalia. Before we begin, I will tell you a story to describe the first view of what happened in Somalia and how bad it has become in the perspective of international human rights. This is the story of Aisha Ilian Adan, 12 years old, who went missing on February 24, and her body was discovered in the next day near her home in North Galkayo, Puntland. According to multiple media reports, Aisha was raped, mutilated, and strangled to death. And these men are responsible of doing such crime to the girls. That case is one of 1,000 case reported incidents of sexual violence in Somalia, documented by UN in 2020. Somalia is known as one of the poor countries that is struggling with various factors of problems and crises in its own country, regardless of external or internal issues. Ongoing armed conflict, insecurity, lack of state protection, and recurring humanitarian crises expose Somali civilians to serious abuse. There are an estimated 2.6 million internally displaced people, many living unassisted and vulnerable to abuse. As the nature of the world and human beings, poverty and security instability leads to other social problems. Unfortunately, those problems also happen in this Somalia and include sexual violations to children. This issue is frustrating and sad because not only adults are involved, but the children are also receive those fates. In fact, they receive much worse fate than the adults in a way that we cannot imagine. Internally displaced women and girls remain at particular risk of sexual and gender-based violence by armed men and civilians. Various conventions and declarations have been created by various parties, especially international bodies, as one of the efforts to help and alleviate the plights of the people in Somalia. However, it can be seen that the issues of children's rights in Somalia, especially regarding the matter of sexual violence, have never been resolved along with this country crisis. These details and discussion on these issues will be explained further by my group mates. Please welcome.
The adoption and abuse of children and youth in the form of sexual violence is one of the issues faced by among the 1.5 million Somalis who are burdened with various negative impacts after the fall of Said Barre, which is one of Somalia president in 1991, which led to the absence of leaders and civil war after that. So the United Nations documented more than 100 cases of sexual violence involving girls in Somalia in 2019. This is what stated and reported in United Nations data. So after research and observation, girls who come from marginalized minority groups with limited access and disabilities are often being victims of sexual violence because of what? Because they do not have the opportunities and access to report sexual crimes that have befallen themselves. So, sexual violence is widespread in almost all areas of Somalia. Significantly, in these 2 decades of civil war and the collapse of countries, administrative policy have created like a greater rate of Somali children losing their families and homes, which are then making them more vulnerable to sexual violence. At the same time, attackers also commit sexual violence and other oppression on them no matter where they are. So even they are on their way to the markets or farms, because of what? Because this sexual violence and rape are already considered as common by most of Somalis, especially for those who are members of minority communities marginalized in Somalia. So this is what mentioned in Bureau of International Labour Affairs in 2018. In the first 6 months of 2013, 800 cases of sexual violence and rape in Mogadishu, which are stated in Somalia, were reported by the United Nations. So, in fact, the number of these cases can be much higher than reported as Many victims act to not report on the sexual violence which they are facing due to losing fight in the justice system, when the attackers itself are usually members of the national security forces themselves. So this is what Amnesty International found in 2013. So to be emphasized, about a third of victims of sexual violence in Somalia are from children, according to the United Nations Children's Fund or UNICEF report.
And I will continue to present about the Human Rights Convention and Declaration. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, is a major international document that exists in the history of universal of human rights that has been established with different culture and law from all regions around the world and has been declared on December 10, 1948 in Paris. By this declaration, universal rights have been protected and has translated into more than 500 languages. So under UDHR, everyone including children has their right and liberty without discrimination, including in skin color, religion, race, language, gender, political, ethnic or social origin, genetic or other status. The United Nations Convention on the Right of Child (UNCRC) is an international treaty that binding to all states and established for every child, irrespective of race and religion, have their right in social, educational, economic and politics. The UNCRC has submitted 54 articles related to child rights and how the government should practice and cooperate in making this child right to be protected. Therefore, in 54 articles, there are several articles related to protecting children from sexual crime and violence. Based on United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF defined the sexual abuse and exploitation including the inducement or coercion of a child to engage in any unlawful or physically harmful sexual activity, the use of children in commercial sexual exploitation, the use of children in audio or visual image of child sexual abuse. Lastly, child prostitution, sexual slavery, sexual exploitation in travel and tourism, trafficking within and between countries, and sale of children for sexual purpose and forced marriage. Based on CRC, there are 4 articles that are significant to the right of child in protecting from sexual abuse. First is, in Article 19, Clause 1, show that the state parties must to take appropriate action in legal, administrative, social, and educational actions to defend the child from all and any form, including mental and physical ferocity, abuse, neglectful and negligence behavior, exploitation and manipulation, including sexual exploitation, while the children are under their parental care, guardians, or other person who has custody to the child. Second is, in Article 34 has stipulated that states should protect the right of children from all forms of sexual exploitation and sexual abuse, and therefore state must take proactive action in appropriate to preclude. In Article 34 Clause A, compulsion against child to involve in some sexual activity illegally. 34 Clause B, the exploitation of children that involve in prostitution or other sexual behavior. And lastly, 34 Clause C, the exploitation of children involved in the pornography material and performance. On the other hand, in Article 35, expressed that the state parties should take all appropriate in national, bilateral and multilateral action to preclude any activity involve the deeds of abduction, sale or trafficking of child for any kind of purpose. Lastly, in Article 36 has indicated that the state should protect the right of children from all type of exploitation and has a bad effect on the welfare of children. Around the world, there are millions of children who have been denied the right to be protected from sexual crime and violence. Hence, the Convention and Declaration of Human Rights, such as the CRC, have submitted several international articles to defend the fate of children in obtaining right through all forms of protection, including protection from any sexual criminal activity and adversely affect the physical and mental health of children.
The presentation will be continued with the action that has taken by the Somalian government in order to protect the right of children of the Somalis. In October 2015, the Somalia government has ratified the Convention of the Right of the Child (CRC), and that makes automatically 196 countries that ratified the convention. The ratification of this convention portrays that the Somalia government want to follow the international standard and regulation in order to protect the future of the Somali children. Following to that, Ministry of Women and Human Rights Development also launched a drafting process of sexual offences bill in order to criminalize this child marriage, rape, and sexual trafficking in 2018. This bills has set a clear duties for the responsible officer in order to protect the vulnerable groups, especially the children. However, the adoption of the bill was not convincing the future of the Somali children, as it was yet to be enacted and also has been pending for more than 2 years in the House of Parliament. Following to that, there's actually an annual report on children of the United Nations shows that the number of the children that affected by the sexual violence has increased by 23% in 2018 compared to the previous year in 2017. There were also, in the same year, there was also about 100 cases of rape, which including about 26 children that range starting from the 4 years old until 70 years old. In added to that, the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic has also contributed to increases cases of sexual violence on children, that about roughly 25% between January to June in 2020. To make it worse, in August 2020, the Somalia government has proposed a sexual intercourse-related crime bill where the rules would allow marriage for girls when their sexual organs are mature or having consent from their families, and that's where the controversial issues begins to rise. Because it indirectly speak up that it would allow the child marriage and forced marriage to be happen, as well as weaken the protection of the violence victims. Indeed, this bill is full of flaws and having a serious breach of international standard that related to the form of sexual violence toward the children. Thus, the existence of this drafted bill would automatically reworking the respective effort that eager want to bring forward more protection on Somali children for years. Therefore, there's actually suggestion on the matters will be presented by the next presenter.
Suggestion. Every child has the right to get a fairer life. They need to be protected. Children in Somalia facing a difficult life. They have to face sexual violence early the age and it become common issue. They do not have a good experience to remember and to push their life for a better one. Even the Somali government has ratified the Child Rights Convention in 2015, but the governments need other support from foreign countries to overcome the problem of sexual violence. And what I can say that the best suggestion is a state intervention. The state intervention has to cooperate with the Somali government in order to promote policies and expand access to service to protect all children. We suggest that committee members of the CRC or each countries should work together to urge Somalia to withdraw the sexual violence bill. In addition, the involvement of the state must play a role in assisting Somalia in curbing this problem. Among the collaboration that the state can undertake are to increase effectiveness and efficiency by creating special branches of the court to expedite sexual offences. The authoritarian should apply zero-tolerance policy to any police officer involved in sexual violence, and police also should be trained among women to provide prompt and appropriate response and have the skill to investigate this crime. The selection of police officers also requires for individuals who are responsible and committed in performing their duties. The Security Council should impose strict law on the enforcement officer who abuse the power in dealing with the case, because there are the cases report that there are also police officers who also commit this violence. Next suggestion is establish a care center to protect the victims of sexual abuse. The committee members of the CRC or each countries need to provide shelter to victims consisting of abused children. They need to be isolated for their own safety. By providing shelter, protection like we give support and will lead them to create a better life. If they were left to live alone, it might be dangerous. Therefore, appropriate protection will change their perception of life. Having a shelter can save trauma victims from sexual violence. Other suggestion is include sex education in the school curriculum. The government and other cooperation should expose sex education as a subject that compulsory to learn in the early stage of schooling. For instance, in Malaysia, students can learn about sex education in science, physical education, and health subject. Forced marriage or sexual violence against children is a violence in international law. Therefore, they need to be exposed to knowledge of sexual violence at the early age at which they usually fall victims. With their exposure and knowledge, they can open their mind about the matters and can protect children from becoming victims. And last suggestion is encourage compulsory reporting. Children must be able to report that they have been raped to the police without being ignored, judges, or insulted. Somali police force have to work hard to gain the trust of the victim, most of whom do not believe in the criminal justice system, because previously they were provoked by the attitude of the police who do not care about this problem makes them not believe in the credibility of security personnel. Therefore, the police need to be concerned about the report made and change their perception of the role of security personnel previously abused.
We are alarmed by continuous serious violations of international humanitarian law and abuses of human rights, including not only violence against women, but also on children. In conclusion, this kind of case should not ever happen, especially to children in this 21st century. The children all over the world, including Somalia, should have better future, a better security and protection for them to live and grow as any other adult human being. To ensure this violation from not happening and destroying our children's mental health and their future, the adults have to play their parts in order to protect and to teach the children that the world is not a cruel place. It is sad to see how the governments that serve to protect the people are abandoning the public security and jeopardize their citizens into horrible things. And for it to happen to children, just the thoughts of it are unbearable. Children are great imitators, and depending on what adults are showing them, it gives them an overview of what kind of place the world should be. We should be better and do better as human beings and responsible adults to show them better, to teach them better, and more importantly, to protect them better from the filth of the world. To end this presentation, allow me to mention a quote from Nelson Mandela, a former president of South Africa and one of the symbols of human rights. The quote stated, "There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its own children." That's all from us. Thank you.